Today I'll be outfitting the FJ Cruiser with an all-aluminum radiator to 1. Enhance my off-road reliability, and 2. Enhance the coolant capabilities of the FJ Cruiser. So, as I said, this is a 2007 Toyota FJ Cruiser. Right now I'm not having any radiator issues. I actually bought this 2 years ago and I've been meaning to do the installation video, and I'm just now getting to it. But yeah, there's no real issues with my radiator right now, with the exception of just a little bit of leaking from, but this looks like it's more of a radiator cap issue. And probably the seal around the bottom of the radiator cap is going a little bad, which could really just be remedied by replacing the radiator cap. And there looks to be a little coolant there. Other than that, the hoses look to be in good shape, with the exception of them having 150,000 miles on them, which I will also be just changing those out just so I'll have a little more peace of mind. So this video is more of a preventative maintenance for me, and probably you, I guess, if you're following along with this video. The radiator that I'll be installing is a CSF brand radiator. It's one of the cheaper all-aluminum radiators, but it's actually pretty good quality from what I've seen so far, and the unboxing of it I'll have on the side of this video while I'm talking about this, but you can see I've already opened it up just to highlight it in another video of mine that I made. So it's pretty much me reopening the box, but I tried to pack it back the way that they had it when I repacked it. But as far as I know, right now, as of the making of this video, CSF makes all aluminum radiators and Mishimoto makes all aluminum radiators. Both seem to be about the same. They both say they can hold 50% more coolant compared to the stock radiator. It's just visibly considerably larger when you compare it to the stock one. And I will be putting them side by side later in the video and comparing them just to make sure that they are. But according to CSF's website, it is a direct replacement, straightforward install. Didn't come with any instructions, so we'll see how easy this is just to do as a typical radiator replacement, but in this case it will be a radiator upgrade. Looking at the radiator, so you have these two places down here to bolt the 10mm bolts into. Also, this was bent when I got it. I'm not going to bend it back up, I'm just going to leave it like that. But yeah, that was bent when I got it, so it's supposed to be straight. And the ones in the pictures on CSF's website, that's straight. And then this one I do want to point out, since mine is a manual transmission FJ Cruiser, but it does have the nipples, so you can put the automatic transmission fluid lines on it. And then I have 3 bottles of this. This is Xerox. This is the Toyota stuff. So 3 bottles of the 50/50 mix, and it does recommend using 2 bottles of, at least 2 bottles of the non-diluted that you would mix with water, or 3 bottles of the pre-diluted, based on the new capacity of the larger radiator. So you can't go by the factory capacity anymore for the coolant in the radiator after you put this in. Then for the tools that I'm using for this, you don't necessarily need these purple handled pliers that I have here. I got these on Amazon. There's a guy that I worked with that had some, and I pretty much had to get them just because of how much it makes the jobs easier sometimes. But if I squeeze the handle, it basically does that, and you can lock it in place. You can hold the clamp whenever you're releasing a clamp. So these come in extremely handy. I've used these so much over the last 5 years. But I'll probably just be using these. Screwdriver for the plastic snaps, 10mm, and then what is odd, this is probably the only Toyota vehicle that I've seen that uses a 13mm on anything. And the 13mm bolt is actually down there. There's 4 of them that hold the radiator to the chassis. So before you go any further, remove the negative cable of your battery. I'm not removing mine, I'm just going to work carefully. I'm going to take this guard off the top first. Well, try and not break these plastic snaps, but apparently they break pretty easily. That one sounded like it broke, it didn't really break. There's only one 10mm bolt on each side, just regarding the fan shroud. Once this one's out and the other one is out, looks like there's only one other 10mm bolt that holds in that reservoir. Alright. Loosening this lower 10mm bolt. This one is the one that holds in part of the reservoir. Now I'm just loosening the one on the upper part of the fan shroud. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to try to pull this fan shroud out from around the clutch band. I'm just going to leave it on, like in the engine bay pretty much around the clutch band. And I'll just lift the radiator straight out while the fan shroud stays in the engine bay. That way I can slide the new radiator in, and I'm golden. This is filthy. I know. I am very well aware of that. Thank you everybody that's already mentioned that in the comments. I'm going to take this hose clamp off. Now, all my fluid should go in my big bucket that I have down below the FJ Cruiser. That's what I like about lifted vehicles, is you can put all kinds of things underneath them, even if it's a big black storage bin. And usually with a radiator hose you can grab it and you can turn it, but it doesn't look like this one's turning, because turning it releases the hold. I'm just going to try to push it with my screwdriver. Also, what I've done before is I've just taken a razor blade and cut a slice down the side, and then you can just peel it off of the plastic. These are both 10mm nuts that are on top. Now I have easy access to this upper hose clamp. And then my lower radiator hose, which has this clamp on the side. This is why you remove your negative battery cable, because I'm working very close to the positive one. Of course, I put this pointless engine cover back on. Okay, so it looks like the thermostat housing that connects to the lower radiator hose on the engine, that's plastic, so you want to be careful when you're removing the lower radiator hose. Now I'm going to try to look up and see if there's an aluminum version of this plastic. I think it's a thermostat housing, and I don't want plastic in my cooling system. That's the whole point of this video. The lower radiator hose and upper radiator hose are both connected back to the engine. So at this point I'm just loosening the 4 13mm nuts and then swapping out this radiator for the other radiator. Okay, to make this slightly more difficult, this 13mm nut, there's a regular bolt that's not welded in to the chassis that's behind the headlight. When you're taking this off, there's two 10mm bolts. There's one there and one there, and it's just a screw basically. And after you unscrew it, you just lift up like that so that it releases, and there's this weird clip here that goes into the headlight. It's like a guide thing. I don't know if mine's broken or if it's just not grabbing, but that comes off like that. But before this can even release, there's actually a plastic snap there and a plastic snap there that you have to lift up on. That one was missing on mine, so I didn't have to worry about taking that off. But you can see like this just kind of slides out just like that. I have my camera on the front. That's what that wire went to. Alright, so looking down here, so you can see up here where my finger is, and then down there where the light's shining where my finger is, so there's a nut that goes around a bolt. So that's not a stud that's threaded into the frame at all, it's actually a bolt. The nut is the 13mm part, and the bolt is here if you look straight through this little gap inside the headlight. So straight through there, there's the headlight, there's the bumper, the other hole is there. With this steel bumper, there's enough clearance behind that. I can get an extension in and put it on. I don't remember how much clearance you have on the stock bumper. That I'm not able to tell you, so you're just gonna have to deal with getting a tool in there and loosening that up. That's it. So that's number one. Oh, this is not just a nut. It's not just a regular nut. It's actually a 13mm nut that's welded to a washer. Under the passenger side headlight, I have a shallow 12mm socket and a 3-inch extension sitting on the head of that bolt, and it just barely sits out of the this little, I'm just going to call it a little crash bar, but this bar that goes across, it's part of the chassis. So it's pretty easy to get a ratchet on the end of it and hold it in place while you loosen the other side. And then on the driver's side, you have this other bolt that's going through it that holds in the radiator. It's the same thing. It's just a 3-inch extension on a 12mm shallow socket, just a normal average. And now I get the fan shroud kind of pushed back as far as I can. It's a little difficult getting these. Well, one, trying to keep these bolts from falling out, but two, trying to get it off the bottom bolts and then lift it up, because it feels like something's holding it. It might help out if you have a second person hold the fan shroud back so that the drain plug doesn't get hung on it. That's what was getting hung, was the bottom of the drain plug was getting hung on the bottom of the fan shroud. Now it's getting hung on something else and I can't see that anything is even in the way. Oh. The AC line on the passenger side. That gets in the way. And then the AC line is here on the driver's side. So those are both in the way. That's it. Now let's compare these two. Right, and then these are both lined up beside each other. You can see like this one, that's about 1.25 inches thick, and the factory one is probably a little over a 1/2 inch thick. So it's considerably larger. Everything looks like it lines up. The drain plug is just different. It's shorter on this, and then you can see like this has the transmission cooler lines where those would connect, but obviously mine's a manual transmission, so mine doesn't have those. Mine just has blank spots where it looks like they probably drilled and tapped the fittings into it for the transmission cooler lines from the factory. So these are slightly different. There's just looks like a little clamp, like a little 10mm or so screw clamp, versus where the fan shroud goes into there, just slides into that little gap. So I'll probably open that up a little bit more so that the fan shroud slides in nicely. Same thing over here. So you've got that, and then that everything else is pretty... Sorry, I have my tripod in the way, but... Yeah, see, everything else is pretty much... The only thing that's different is mine, that's bent there. That's bent down a little bit, and it's not like that in the picture, so it's probably something that happened in shipping. But then, moving back over here, there's only one of these that's different from all the other ones. So the top one, on the passenger side, has this little hook that's right there. So that slips into this hole right there where my finger is. So you actually have to slide the bolt out some with the other hand, hook this in place, and then slide the bolt back through, and then the bushing would fit over this. So this one would go on before the other ones. Yeah, so that just slips out fairly easily, and the rubber comes with it. So this one, just do the same thing and just slide the rubber forward. I'm just going to leave this rubber was stuck to it. It'll make it easier to assemble it again. I'm just going to leave that that washer stuck to the rubber. So these go together. They go on that side. I'm going to take the rest of these off. Looks like the rest of these come off kind of the same way. This one is just a washer on the top passenger side. How well can I do this with one hand? Not very well, apparently. There we go. That's a tight fit one. Okay, got it. Top driver side is just like the lower passenger side one, and then that just slips out. And lower driver side, it's the same way. So all these come out easy except for the top passenger side. Putting this back together, the nut was on this side, so that slides in that way. The front of the vehicle will be behind my hand, and then this slides in there. It's good. Alright, and before I put the radiator in, remember there was this one rubber, kind of a rubber washer, I guess, that was on the top passenger side. I'm just going to slip that back over this top one on the driver's side. It's about 4 inches in behind the headlight. I'm going to loosen 2 of the bolts on this driver's side headlight. There's one 10mm bolt here, and there's one 10mm bolt directly under the headlight. You really can't miss it. I'm not even going to try to put it on video. I loosened up the 10mm screw underneath the headlight, but that didn't seem to do anything. The headlight is still held in pretty tight. So I just loosened up this top 10mm screw, and I just lifted up on the plastic here. So I just lifted up on that so that I can slide it back. I have just enough room to squeeze my hand up in there. I'll slide this bolt back in after that radiator is in. Alright, I loosened these 10mm bolts. I loosened this 10mm bolt and that 10mm bolt on the other side that the fan shroud slides into, just because I don't want to loosen it whenever it's inside the vehicle. There's an AC line on the passenger side and an AC line on the driver's side that I'm trying to slide this between. Let's go left. I should have the left side more. And right now I'm working on lining it up on this top passenger side radiator mount. And that one's in. Let's see if I can slide this bolt in. First shot. First shot. That sound was some threads. Radiator's tightened back up. So now I'm just going to lift this fan shroud up and slide it down into those 2 little screw clamps that are down there. If you took your headlight bolts out like I did, these 2 little screws, and just make sure you put those back. So I'm going to put this 10mm bolt in first so that I can work with the hole on this fan shroud to get this the fan shroud to line up with where the new thread is. So right now, I just have to round that out a little bit. Now I'm working in this direction because I don't want to risk damaging the radiator. goes in straight. So that hole just needed to be pushed over. I was using the side of the drill bit just to cut into that. So I was using the side of the drill bit to cut into the plastic a little bit and just round out the hole just a little bit more. I'm not getting this too tight either. I'm just going to get this barely snug because it's really just holding on plastic. Now I have a 10mm gear wrench. I'm just going to tighten down this bolt that goes on the bottom of the fan shroud. So this is exactly what I didn't want to use, the screw type hose clamps, but the spring type hose clamps, I can't get the stock ones open large enough to slide over the new nipple with the radiator hose. So looks like these are going on. Alright, those two clamps are on. It's the old radiator cap. And it's the new radiator cap. This one's rated at 20 pounds pressure, 1.4 bar, and these old ones are, I don't know, I think they're around 14 psi. Alright, so the air bubbles are slowly working their way up to the top of the system. I mean, that's kind of expected. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to open up my garage door first, start up the FJ Cruiser, turn the heater on so that way it bypasses the thermostat, and I can work all of the air out of the system. Since air is lighter than coolant or water, the air will rise to the top, and then I can top off the antifreeze. Right, and there's the new radiator, all done, finished to this side. So that's that. I just took it on a 5-minute test drive after I had it sitting and idling for 5 minutes just to check and make sure there weren't any leaks. After I got back, I checked the radiator hose, the upper radiator hose, just to see if it was nice and solid to show that there wouldn't be really any air in the system. There probably is a little bit of air in the system, but I'll check it tomorrow after I get back from work and then top it off. But when I got back, there weren't any leaks. That was the main thing. All the hoses were tight. I hated having to use the screw hose clamps, but I used the screw hose clamps and it worked out great. So on the test drive, it got up to normal operating temperature. It wasn't colder, it wasn't hotter. So that's pretty much expected. It is a stock vehicle. It's not like it's going to overheat, and the thermostat's still working as it should. So I do not plan on putting a lower threshold thermostat in this. And the reason is it really doesn't belong in a vehicle like this that's programmed from the factory for everything to work at the operating temperature that the thermostat regulates. So I'm not changing out the thermostat. I'm leaving that the same. If I do change out the thermostat, it'll be the same threshold, the same temperature thermostat. No lower threshold thermostats. The one thing I don't like about the install was how difficult it was to get the radiator out. The bolt on one side that was hard to get to, and the nut on the back side. It doesn't seem like something that Toyota would design, especially with the 13mm head on the nut. All in all, it's a pretty straightforward install. Not really a lot to explain or figure out except the bolts that come through the front from behind the headlight and then below the headlights. The radiator was a direct swap in. The only real difficulty with the radiator install was that fan shroud and having to round out that one bolt hole so that the fan shroud lined up with the radiator. The next thing that I'm going to look into changing is the last plastic piece that's on this cooling system, and that's that thermostat housing cover that goes onto the lower radiator hose coming off of the engine. I am going to try my best to find an aluminum one, something that replaces that completely, that's not plastic. So whether that's billet, whether that's cast aluminum, I don't know, I don't care. I do not want that to be plastic. So that plastic piece is 15 years old and has 150,000 miles on it. And that's not good. So it's nearing the end of its life, and I do not want that to fail. The entire reason that I changed the radiator out when it was still working perfectly was I did not want the radiator to fail. can get me stuck somewhere, especially when I'm off-roading. So, same thing goes for that plastic piece. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thanks a lot for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment. If you've watched this far, check the description below to see if maybe I've found a replacement for that plastic piece that's on the lower radiator hose going onto the engine. But thanks a lot for watching, and God bless you guys.